La Orchila Island, off Venezuela's Caribbean coast, is today the stage of a military spectacle. Wide shots of Venezuelan Navy ships fill the horizon, their grey silhouettes cutting across turquoise waters. The manoeuvres, broadcast on state television, are more than routine drills. They are a statement. Helicopters hover low over the decks, while flotillas of naval vessels surge forward, churning the Caribbean in synchronized patterns. Radars spin, antennas bristle, and decks bustle with activity. Venezuela calls it a defense exercise. Washington calls it provocation. The timing is critical. Only weeks ago, U.S. forces operating what they describe as an anti-drug mission destroyed 2 Venezuelan boats. 14 people suspected of drug trafficking were killed. For Caracas, this was not crime fighting, but aggression, an act of hostility in its own backyard. Now, before cameras and commanders, the Venezuelan armed forces reply. Above, the roar of jet engines drowns the sea breeze. The Air Force streaks across the sky, their flight paths deliberate, dramatic, designed for broadcast. Fighter jets glide in formation, dipping low before climbing sharply against the horizon. On the waters below, naval detachments patrol closer to La Orchila, an island with history and symbolism. Once whispered to be the private retreat of Hugo Chavez, it is now the stage for Venezuela's defiance. Amphibious craft move towards shore. Soldiers brace their weapons. The choreography of military readiness unfolds with precision. Then, the land deployment. Armoured vehicles roll from transport ships onto Orchila's sandy ground. Troops in formation board trucks, their uniforms neat, their movements deliberate, every step filmed, every manoeuvre broadcast nationwide. This is not just an exercise. It is a performance of sovereignty. Venezuelan officials frame these manoeuvres as necessary defense, but the imagery speaks louder than the official line. In Caracas, President Nicolás Maduro faces sanctions, inflation, and domestic dissent. By showing his military at work, he signals strength to his people, to his allies, and most importantly, to his adversaries. Washington, meanwhile, maintains its stance. U.S. Southern Command insists its Caribbean patrols are about narcotics interdiction, not confrontation. Yet the destruction of Venezuelan vessels earlier this month has escalated rhetoric on both sides. Analysts warn that what begins as an anti-drug patrol can spiral into a clash of navies in contested waters. The Caribbean is not just an expanse of sea, it is a corridor of geopolitics. Venezuela's oil-rich coasts, nearby islands with U.S. alliances, and the shadow of maritime trafficking routes all converge here. When Caracas conducts military maneuvers, the message reaches far beyond its own shores. Historically, La Orchila has carried weight. In 2009, rumours swirled that Russia considered the island for long-range bomber deployments. Though never confirmed, the speculation was enough to send ripples through Washington. Today, Orchila again takes the spotlight, not through rumour, but through military display. Maduro's challenge is layered. At home, inflation cripples households. Over 7 million Venezuelans have emigrated in search of stability. Power shortages and food insecurity test the patience of those who remain. Against this backdrop, showcasing jets, ships and soldiers serves a dual purpose. It bolsters national pride and distracts from domestic hardship. Internationally, Caracas leans on alliances with Moscow, Beijing and Tehran. Joint military exercises with Russia and arms deals with Iran have been paraded as proof that Venezuela is not alone. Yet the reality is isolation. Sanctions have dried up oil revenues, and its military hardware grows increasingly difficult to maintain. Still, Orchila sends the message that what remains is enough to resist. For regional neighbours, these manoeuvres stir unease. Smaller Caribbean nations rely on U.S. guarantees but do not welcome escalation. Colombia, itself at odds with Caracas, watches closely. Brazil, balancing between pragmatism and ideology, sees the Caribbean tension as a potential flashpoint for wider instability. Experts caution that while today's exercise is tightly controlled, the risks are real. A miscalculation at sea, an accidental encounter between patrols, or even the misidentification of a vessel could spark confrontation. In volatile waters, perception can be as dangerous as intention. Back on La Orchila, the maneuvers continue. Helicopters shuttle between ships and shore. Soldiers disembark, assemble and march. Radars sweep the skies while naval gunners test their systems. Each movement is catalogued for broadcast, proof of vigilance, proof of readiness. For Maduro's government, these images are powerful tools. State television repeats them in cycles, framing Orchila as both shield and sword. Commentators label the maneuvers defensive, patriotic, a stand against imperialism. The narrative is consistent. Venezuela under siege, Venezuela unbowed. But beyond propaganda, there are real questions. Can Venezuela sustain such displays with an economy in collapse? Can it afford to keep ships at sea, jets in the air, and soldiers in the field? Or are these spectacles temporary illusions, shows of power masking weakness? For Washington, the calculus is equally complex. The U.S. cannot ignore the flow of narcotics through Caribbean waters, yet heavy-handed operations risk fueling Maduro's rhetoric. Every destroyed vessel, every seized cargo feeds his narrative of foreign aggression. As the sun dips lower over La Orchila, the exercises wind down. Ships return to formation, soldiers regroup, aircraft circle back to base, yet the symbolism lingers. For the Venezuelan government, it is proof of defiance. For the United States, it is a challenge. For the region, it is a reminder that in these waters, crisis is never far away. The Caribbean tonight is calm but charged. Between the US and Venezuela, the Gulf is widening. And as Orchila's maneuvers fade into evening, one question remains unanswered. How long can tensions stay contained before the next spark ignites a storm?